guys? Welcome to our first live mock interview of this cycle. So it is interview season. We're seeing a lot of people getting interviews, and that's very exciting, but I know it's also nerve-wracking. So you can learn just as much from watching someone else go through practice and hear what questions they have as you can getting your own practice. So take that mindset into this as we go through things. You may hear things that aren't necessarily relevant to you, but you can put a spin on it that makes it fit for you. Hi. Welcome. Thank you again for volunteering your time to practice with us.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes. Okay, I'm gonna scoot that up a little bit so I can see everything. And just because we were just talking about it, how much notice did you get on your interviews? I know you have 2 coming up.
Yeah, so the first one, which is coming up soon, I had 3 weeks notice. And then the next one also had a virtual and in-person option. And the virtual was before the in-person, and that's the first week of October. So I have a lot.
Wow.
Which
is a lot of time. Wow, yeah. They must be super organized and like have everything together. Yeah. I mean, that's very impressive. All right. And have you interviewed anywhere previously, just for everyone?
Yeah, I have had 3 interviews from last cycle, and then Eastern Virginia is also part of last cycle. So they're kind of one of the late starters for that. But so 4 total for last cycle.
Okay. Is there anything that you feel like you did well or that you need to work on?
In the previous interviews, because it was kind of a 50-50 split, in person, I felt like I just wasn't quite comfortable enough, just kind of being myself and showing up. And the virtual was really hard because you can't like vibe off the other person very much. And that was a little harder to read, and also harder to like let your personality show. Even though we've been virtual for so long, it seems like it's still kind of awkward and weird. But in person, I really enjoyed those more.
Okay. Well, we'll be looking out for some of that as we jump in here. So it looks like you'll be getting a little bit of everything, to be honest. Some traditional interview, maybe some group, and then some MMI. So that's, we always say prepare for everything. Prepare. Mm-hmm. You never know what they're going to give you. But yeah, it does look like you'll get a little bit of everything. All right. So let's just jump in and tell us a little bit about who you are and where you come from.
Yeah, sounds good. So my name's Christina, and I live in Colorado, where I currently work for an orthopedic clinic, where I manage their DME program. And part of that is being a clinical assistant as well. So I get a lot of good patient contact with them. And then I also work part-time as a EMT at an urgent care, which has been great for building clinical skills and that kind of stuff. I moved here from Lake Tahoe, where I went to school at the University of Nevada, where I was also a dual sport athlete. And I grew up in West Central Idaho, up in the mountains in the middle of nowhere, and enjoyed everything outdoors. So now in my free time, I also volunteer for a horse center where we rehabilitate rescue horses for adoption. And that's where I spend most of my time when I'm not in clinic.
Okay. So it sounds like you've done a lot of different things and kind of had a lot of experience. What led you to choosing PA over any other profession?
Yeah, so I'm a second career applicant as well. I spent 18 years coaching elite level ski racing. So coaching people is something that I really love doing. And I actually had a work injury where I ended up seeing a PA and a surgeon, and the PA really just had a positive impact on me and kind of introduced me to the process and what it's like being a PA. And then I started working for them shortly after shadowing with her a couple of times in the OR and in clinic. And I just thought it was so cool that she could do so many different things and had so much clinical knowledge. And her skills in the OR were really cool to watch, like suturing and things like that. And then the teamwork too between the provider and the PA, that was really impactful. And they just encouraged me to pursue this career for the last, I would say, 10 years. But I really loved my job before, and now I'm just fully committed to becoming a PA. I went back to school and got an additional degree in health sciences so that I could continue on this journey.
Had you ever thought about medicine before?
I have thought about medicine my entire life. My dad had an old Grey's Anatomy book from probably the 60s or 70s, and I used to read it for fun. I'm not sure why. I couldn't tell you anything at this point, but yeah, I've always been intrigued by medicine, and we grew up in a really rural area and we didn't have access to a lot. So I was always wondering, how can medicine be better? How can we have more of what we need in such a small area? And I got my EMT in 2010 with the intention of continuing to step into medicine, and then finally got the opportunity to switch careers. So.
Okay. You mentioned your community and background. So how have you at this point impacted your community, and how does that translate into your goals as a PA?
Yeah, where I live is considered rural. We're right on the I-70 corridor up in the mountains. So we're about 2 hours from Denver. And a lot of the care that our patients need is pretty limited. And we're really lucky to have orthopedic surgeons up here who love living in this area and love the outdoor lifestyle, and taking care of those patients and making sure that they can continue doing what they love doing up here in the mountains has been really special. And then again, in urgent care, we're able to help people get back out doing what they love to do.
Okay. Tell me about a time that you were disappointed in yourself.
Gosh. I would say probably most recently forgetting to tell a provider an important piece of information. It was an allergy to a medication that would have had a pretty big impact if we had given it to them. Luckily, I was able to catch it, but I beat myself up for it for a couple of weeks. Everything turned out fine. There was no drug interaction, but it's one of those things that you just have to be diligent about and remember to ask all the questions.
When you think about PAs, what is it that you think makes a PA successful?
The PAs that I get to work with are extremely compassionate toward their patients, and they're able to put themselves in the patient's shoes and really have that connection with them. And so having that compassion and empathy toward the patient situation is important, but also being well educated and understanding that there might be something that they don't know and they have to ask. So being humble and knowing that you don't know everything, I think is really important. And the PAs that I've gotten to work with definitely have those characteristics.
If you could change one thing about the PA profession, what would you change?
I really like the way that the state compact legislation is going and being able to transfer licensure across state lines. I think that's probably one of the biggest benefits right now, not knowing the future, obviously. But life happens and you have to move, or maybe your practice gets shut down, or something like that. And who knows what the situation is, but being able to take your knowledge and experience to another location in another state, perhaps, or even in a different discipline altogether, and specialize in another area. That's really interesting to me in comparison to what physicians can do.
How would you say that you learn the best?
Definitely experience. I like to be hands-on, um, making up stories about whatever it is that we're studying at the time, and having a connection in some other way other than just reading chapters. That's not really my vibe. I like to have the experience of the thing that we're studying, and being able to have visual and tactile feedback.
All right, let's stop there and we'll talk through them. How are you feeling?
Good. Always a little nervous, but
yeah,
that's okay.
Well, yeah, and that's totally fine. And I feel like after an interview, I kind of black out and I'm like, wait, what did I say? And what was I asked? I don't even know at this point. Is there anything that you felt like threw you off or you were unsure about? We'll go through each one, so it's okay if you don't remember.
Nothing stands out right now.
Okay.
Probably.
And we'll go to the feedback channel. But overall, I think you did fantastic. I felt, and I'll tell you these things as we go through, but I felt that you were confident and so I've seen your application. And the one thing just for people watching to remember is that whoever's interviewing you may not have seen your application. They may have it in front of them, but I think both of y'all's were 40 something pages. They're crazy long. They're not sitting there going through it and reading everything. Some schools will give them a summary page about you. But I have a friend who interviews for one of those programs, and she said the stuff that they'll write on there is completely random and a lot of times not very helpful. It'll just say, was a swimmer, works in a PT office, and that's it. And she doesn't know what to do with that. So you just never know what information your interviewer has. So always feel free to expand on things that are on your application, give a little context, give a little background. If you'd like, that would be helpful. Just you can do that. I'm giving you permission. Sometimes you're like, repeat something I said, or I can't say something that was in my personal statement, and you totally can. You definitely can. All right, we'll jump back to the beginning. I'm going to look at my notes here. I'm trying to see where people are talking. Okay, I think I'm going to have to go back to the questions after. I'm going to stay in the feedback channel for now. All right. So we started with tell me about yourself, a variation of that. And something that I think is really important when you're preparing and practicing, especially if you haven't had interviews yet, is not preparing for a certain question to be asked a certain way, just because you never know how they're going to ask it. So they could put a little variation on it and still be asking you kind of the same thing, but clearly ask you about yourself. I love that you introduced yourself with your name and where you're from. So again, even though they may have that information, I think there's power in making that introduction to where you are helping them to remember your face with your name. Did you have to submit a picture or take a picture at any of your interviews?
A few of them, yeah. And I was like, what kind of photo do you want? Just a white background? Am I okay like this? What do you want?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be anything intense. I had somebody who was like, I paid for a full-on headshot photo shoot for this. You don't have to do that. Go on your back porch, go outside, get against a white wall, and you can take a picture if they ask you to submit it. But if you're like, why do they want a picture of me? It's because when they go back and they talk about you, they may not, they've just talked to 10 to 20 new people, and so they want to remember your face. So if you're kind of helping them with that connection, I think it's helpful. So yeah, I think your intro was good. then you got into some of your experience, like what you're doing now, working in the ortho clinic and working as an EMT at urgent care. I can't read my handwriting, but basically I said I think you did a good job of kind of incorporating all of that and showing that you are working hard and doing all these things versus just saying like, oh, I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm doing this. You're able to kind of really, I feel like, explain what you're doing. Somebody said they had to look up what a DME is. So you may want to explain what that acronym is when telling them about yourself.
Yeah.
Okay. So getting some good feedback. We'll go through that. And then I feel like you got better at this. I feel like at the beginning you were kind of thinking about what you're saying more, which is such a natural thing to do. Like you start to think about how you want to say things or I won't say the words you're saying, but kind of like it felt like you were kind of thinking through it. And then it got way more natural and just talking and, actually showing yourself more as we went. But yeah, I think you did a good job there, adding even more personal details about like being an athlete, where you're from. So I think you covered that one completely. So when we get into, YPA and for an applicant like you who is a second career, I think it is important to show why you're making the switch.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe, and you didn't necessarily go into this, or was the injury why you stopped coaching or no?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't really talk about that.
Okay.
And I've gone back and forth. I've done it both ways.
Okay.
And I got mixed reviews both ways. So
That's okay. That's okay.
Right.
So I think and that's what. So we'll go through it, and then we can kind of maybe talk through that. Because the things, especially as a second career or like making a switch that I look for, or like even if you're switching, you want to go to med school and now you're wanting to go to this. I think what I kind of look for is like why you weren't satisfied in what you're doing, like why, like what that moment, what that was. And so I think that's why I kind of followed it up with like, had you thought about medicine before, or was this just something new, or kind of trying to maybe tease that out a little bit. So I almost think if you incorporated that in there some of like, I had always considered medicine, but this is life took me as an athlete and doing this thing I loved, which is awesome. But then, having an injury, realizing that there may be a deadline on that, I started looking into, that kind of brought me back to medicine. I'm putting words in your mouth, but kind of just showing how you could navigate that a little bit. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think in one of my interviews, I said that my position with the ski team was eliminated. And so I reached out to a friend in the clinic and got a job. And then I was like, why haven't I done this before?
Yeah. Well, and I think that like that makes sense. That kind of explains some of that. But even then, like I think you could just like help them to know that seed was always there. Like it wasn't completely random. Like you had kind of already had that thought. And then, I think it sounds like you have a ton of support, a ton of encouragement, which is very nice and helpful as far as coming from where you work. And then like it was cool how you got into shadowing and working. One part I also wanted just a little bit more was you made a comment. I'm trying to remember exactly how it went, but something about how the teamwork aspect was very impactful for you. But I want just like a little bit more about why that was impactful for you, because with these YPA explanations, it gets very easy to throw out some of the buzzwords about it. I feel like you had a great understanding of the PA profession from both this question and one of the ones later on. But I think being able to maybe say like, I had coached a team, I've led a team, I've been on a team, and that's a part, of that's something that I enjoy, that I want to continue in my profession. Just adding that personal connection to why that is specifically important to you.
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay. I feel like it's hard to like I have to try to explain it, and
I
sometimes
feel like I wrote about it in one of my essays, and I just have to remember some of those key points.
yeah. And for everyone watching, like definitely go back and read your application and your essays and your supplementals. You can download them from CASPA, but definitely read back through everything you sent there. Look at your transcripts, look at your grades. They can pull anything at all from your application. So you definitely want to kind of refresh on that before you get to the interview as well. Okay, so then we got into your impact in your community and your goals as a PA. And I think, you know, being able to explain your background, being from a rural setting, and then getting into some of kind of like how y'all have already been able to reach some of those patients. I think you could take it a little bit further. This is kind of the same as where do you see yourself in 5 years? And, you know, where are you going with this? And so thinking about, I feel like you wrote about this too. I think in maybe I think it's in your personal statement actually. Yeah, like the second or third paragraph where you talked about how like you also had a high Medicaid population and that was something like you strongly like advocated for patients getting care. So I think being able to say like, you know, like working with this type of patient population in a specialty clinic, trying to provide care to people who, like you said, need it to do the things they love to do or their work. I see myself in the future maybe being in a similar role, maybe being in a different role, kind of take it that step further to how you plan to advocate for patients or PAs or, you know, the area, whatever that looks like for you.
Makes sense. Sometimes I feel rushed.
Yeah, which I think, and I would say it's interesting because your first couple answers were longer and then they just got shorter and shorter. Did you like you just like didn't have time, like that you're running out of time?
Yeah.
Yeah, like so don't. Okay, my caveat to that is you have time and you probably aren't talking as long as you think you are.
Yeah, for sure.
So as you practice, video yourself. Everyone hates it. I hate it. I don't watch these back ever. But video yourself and see how long you're talking. Because when we're practicing for MMI and mock interviews, a lot of times we'll time you and people are talking 30 to 45 seconds.
Yeah.
Like maybe if they push it, they'll get to 2 minutes or so. I've had a very small handful of people. There's one guy I remember completely that I did have to like stop him and cut him off. But rarely do I ever have to be like, all right, you're out of time. So you have time, and I would just go on if you are providing new information, keep talking. And on the flip side of that, you don't know what they're going to ask you. And so I've also had people who emailed me and they're like, my interview was 5 minutes and they asked me 3 things and then it was over. So if they have 3 questions on their list to ask you and you give shorter answers, like then that might just be all they ask you and then that's it. Or some of them ask a million questions and they're an hour long, but you just never know. So I would say err on, if you see an opportunity to provide information, try to incorporate it if you can, if it's new information. And that is hard when you've done a lot of different things and have a lot to share.
Yeah.
Okay. Flipping to the back here. Here, I'll show y'all how bad my handwriting is. It's so bad. You can't see it. I disappeared. That's it's like an invisibility cloak. Okay, so as we get into, tell me about a time you were disappointed in yourself.
Yeah.
And I saw something in the comments, and I agree. I think you could take this one a little bit further.
I wasn't really sure how to answer it because there's so many things that you can be disappointed by in yourself, right?
Yeah. I honestly, I'm gonna be honest. I came up with that question on the fly. That was not what I had to ask. But when I'm in a mock interview, this goes a couple ways. If somebody is doing well, my questions get progressively like either harder or off the wall because I just want to.
Noted.
So that was one that I was like, let's just see how this goes. But it is a good example. So tell me about, and then whatever it is, tell me about a time you're disappointed in yourself, though, I think is a good example of, like you said, a way you can take a question in so many directions.
Mm-hmm.
It can be work, it can be academics, it can be personal. Just me right now, I can think of multiple answers. And so ultimately you have to pick one, and it needs to be, something you can explain, and something that you can show a lesson from, which then again, when we're in this situation, like, so it's funny, in the comments was that I was intimidated by that question.
Yeah.
How do you bring up something that is relevant but not alarming? And then, and yeah, I mean, that seems to be the question that other people have commented on the most. So I think I appreciate that your answer was extremely honest, and I think it shows, your ethics in that situation. I think you could have expanded more on the situation in the story a little bit. And keep in mind, with anything in essays or interviews, that your audience is medical. And so you can give, if you feel comfortable, a little bit of information just to help them understand the situation. Because if it's me and I hear you say something, like if you're referring to a medical illness or event or something that happened, I'm automatically going to assume it was really bad, unless you don't like, and usually it's not as bad as what, like, it's okay, and so, like, I think you could make this a little bit more, this type of answer, this type of question, a little bit more anecdotal. If you kind of give a little bit more background of, clinic was really busy that day, or the patient was, not providing as much information, or whatever. I switched places with somebody, whatever happened. Normally when I give report, this is kind of how I do it. But that day, I forgot that the patient had an allergy to penicillin. And luckily, I would want to understand more of how you caught it. Like, did you remember? How did you handle it? Because that is going to tell me, if people are like, oh, I don't know if that, like, I would be that honest. But that does tell me a lot about you as a provider and a PA, because we all make mistakes. It happens. Whether somebody is allergic to someone, or something, they're pregnant, they're breastfeeding, and you give them something, you just never know. So I think you said kind of, you've got to be diligent, you've got to ask questions, but I would just like a little bit more there as well of, like, what did you learn? What are you doing differently now?
Yeah.
And how is that going to impact you as a student and PA? I think it's fine to say, I realize we're all going to make mistakes and overlook things, but the standard that I want to have, this was eye-opening to me, that's something I want to be very aware of, and make sure that, I'm on top of things as much as possible, to kind of cover that. But yeah, I think other examples, like, that would be a good time to bring up a class that you maybe studied for or didn't study for as hard as you could have, and you didn't do as well, or a rough semester. I think of even, like, things as simple as, my daughter was in camp this week and she asked me to give her $2 for the snack stand on Tuesday, and I completely forgot to bring the money. And so we got there and it was a huge ordeal. And I felt terrible. And, my takeaway from that is that I have to realize that I'm a human. I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to forget things, but I need better ways to not forget them. And I have to do things when I say I'm going to. So whether that's in my office or working with patients, doing something for someone in the office, that's something that was eye-opening to me. So whatever your thing that comes to mind is, it probably works there, or you can shape shift it enough to make it work. So what makes a successful PA? I thought your answer to this was fantastic. Gave me lots of qualities kind of pulled from your experience. And this, I already kind of, had that feeling of you have a really good understanding of PAs, but this definitely solidified it. I was like, all right, you understand this profession, you understand what we are, what we do. And I felt that was a very confident answer, which I think that one even sometimes trips people up a little bit, just because it's easy to list off a bunch of things, but not necessarily mean them or have that background to be able to support it. We'll come back to that in a second. So asking you how you learn best. And I think this is one that goes along with wherever you're applying. So knowing what their teaching style is, and basically being able to kind of echo how that type of teaching impacts your learning. When a school asks something about this, they're really trying to figure out kind of if you're a good fit, if what they offer is what you're looking for. And what kind of student you're going to be in the setting that they offer. So I think, you gave some good discussion of being kind of a hands-on experiential learner, gave us some examples there as well. And so I felt like that answer was good. I think you could potentially, I talked about things being full circle, like bring it back to, stating, I feel like as a PA student, I'm going to be able to make up these stories and apply this knowledge as I did in my degree, and continue as I have in my job and bring that with me into PA school.
Yeah, and maybe even tying it to a class that like pathology.
And a way that, like, if you have an example of how it's helped you in a class, and then how you can relate that to like certain stuff in PA school. Pharmacology now, especially, like, that's huge, the whole like story and example thing. Just because that's so hard to learn. But I think being the more stories, the more examples you can incorporate, the better. That just makes you more and more memorable to the programs. So definitely that. And then I asked, if there's one thing you could change about the PA profession, what would you change? This one felt a little bit muddy to me. Just okay, like, I don't know. She might have answered that, but I'm not completely sure she did. So I think, did fine. But if you can have just a very clear, reason, and it's okay to take a second to think about it too, and like organize your thoughts a little bit. And so I think, you told me what you know about some things about the PA profession, but I don't know that you actually told me what you would change.
Yeah, I think where I was going was probably that more states would enter the compact and make it easier for PAs, but I never.
We just didn't quite get there. Got it.
Never got there.
That's okay. Those questions also tend to make people a little bit nervous.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably, I feel that because we've had providers come from other states and they have to get re-credentialed in Colorado because they're not part of the compact yet, and it's been so painful because it takes forever. It's like it could take a month for that to happen.
Oh yeah, I mean, even in Georgia, like, I have a friend who just switched practices, and they told her it'll be probably 3 months before she's able to see patients just from like within the state, going to a new practice and getting re-credentialed and everything. And it's not a hospital system or anything. So that process is crazy. So I think that's a good answer. But you could just add more and use that personal everything, and that explains a little bit more. So that, if you have a backup story to kind of show what you're saying, I think that is helpful.
Okay. More stories.
More stories. Yeah. More stories, more examples. But you seem genuine, seem confident. I feel like you're definitely on the right track, and just kind of continuing to think through, I talk about it like, and people here may have heard this before too, but I'm a very visualizing person. So in my head, it's like you have a checklist of the things that you want to tell them. And as you check one off, you don't bring that up again and you bring up something else. And so slowly you're just telling them more and more about yourself and going down your list. And you're not going to hit everything, and that's okay. But if you have this list of, I want to tell them I was a ski coach, that teamwork is important to me, that I've worked in this clinic, that I know what a PA is, like all these things that you can pull from, that will be, it just kind of streamlines it so you're not like searching all over all of your experience for all these things if you kind of have your top things you want to tell them.
Yeah.
So cool. Maybe that's helpful to somebody. I don't know. Well, thank you for volunteering.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yes, of course.